So today we're surprising my cousin with a 38-inch ultra-wide productivity $1,600 monitor so he can work better. But before that, we're going to review it, the BenQ EW3880R.
You and I both know that ultra-wide monitors are amazing for productivity. For a video creator like me, video editing on a monitor like this, the BenQ EW3880R, is immense. All this real estate cannot be underestimated at all. Who else will a monitor like this be good for? Would it be good for, say, a software developer? With a 21:9 aspect ratio and a higher than usual resolution of 3800 by 1600 at 37.5 inches, it's hard to see why not. Let's start with color. For people working with SDR, this is absolutely a very respectable monitor for color work. It supports 10-bit color, covers 95% of the DCI P3 color space, and from my measurements was a pretty accurate display with a delta E of less than 2. Oh, and it covers more than 100% of sRGB, so if you're worried about that, no problems there. So if you're editing a picture, color grading a video, or designing a UI for whatever app you're creating, this should be a pretty good screen to gauge your work. And it does help that it's also an IPS panel with great viewing angles, a reasonable amount of even backlighting with minimal backlight bleed, and a respectable 1000:1 contrast ratio as well. It also uses LED backlighting, though I'm unsure of the number of zones, but from what I can tell, a Dell monitor that uses a probably similar panel has WLED backlighting, so I'm willing to bet this has WLED backlighting as well. If you're consuming movies or editing videos on here, the speakers actually work well for that too. It has two 3-watt tweeters and an 8-watt woofer, and while it isn't groundbreaking, it's louder and bassier than my MacBook Pro 16-inch speakers, though it definitely is not as clear as that. Being louder than my MacBook Pro 16-inch is quite impressive because the speakers on here definitely fill up a room. And it's good enough that for the most people who don't care about having the most immense speakers ever, definitely more than enough. It won't replace proper studio monitors, but if you are not a pretentious audio snob, it probably could do a good job for you. The curve on this display is lovely too. At 2300R, it's not a crazy excessive curve, but it definitely helps with ergonomics when you look from left to right on such a wide monitor. Furthermore, the size of this display does make the curve very noticeable, so I'm definitely glad this has it. It is also excellent for anyone working on a laptop too. USB-C on here is capable of a rather respectable 60 watts of power delivery, which means you can charge your laptop while you use the display, which is convenient. And if you have a one cable display as your aim, this does that no problem. On top of that, it has a USB 3 hub on the back with two Type A ports, so if there are any accessories you want to plug in, you can just plug it in into the monitor, no problem at all. However, the ports are really deep in and really hard to access, especially if you got the port cover on, which does help with cable management. But if you're planning to use those USB Type A ports, use it for something that's more of a permanent fixture that you don't always have to unplug, like a webcam or a keyboard, because once the cover is on, it's very troublesome to reach. And you can turn on Hey! Just stop it. It also has HDMI 2.0, an Apple moment, and DisplayPort 1.4, but honestly, it's more than enough for just a 60Hz display. Is that why Apple put only HDMI 2.0 on their MacBook Pro? Usability for this display is also its strong suit. Apart from it being mad heavy, so lifting it up and putting on a stand is kind of troublesome, it's easy to set up. Its settings are well laid out and easy to use, and it is controlled by my preferred method of control, joystick, and it even comes with a remote for, well, remote control. Duh. You can tweak color profiles, color settings on here, turn on HDR or adjust a variety of other basic settings. Pretty standard, but definitely important to have. It's got great ergonomics too, with all the adjustment of height, tilt and swivel one by one. So all good then? Mostly. But it's not perfect. For a display that costs $1,600, it's unfortunately only HDR10. And yes, that is not great at all. It has a peak brightness of 300 nits, which is the absolute bare minimum for HDR10 qualification. So in my opinion, the HDR capabilities on here are literally pointless. And yet HDR is still plastered all over the box and its marketing material. Then again, it's unfair to just judge BenQ because every brand does it these days. But don't go into this thinking it will be a great HDR experience because it just feels like an SDR experience that's a bit brighter. It definitely is plenty bright for SDR work though, so it's not all bad, but I really hate how these display HDR standards have been laid out because HDR 400, 610 are all literally useless. So at this point in the video, after I just talked about the bad stuff, I would like to give a quick disclaimer and say that BenQ did send me this monitor for review and I got to keep it. But the thing is, while I do like this monitor a lot and I wouldn't mind using it, I don't really have a lot of need for it. I don't have much much space for it, and I don't plan to make my MacBook a stationary setup. I already have a PC for that. So I decided to kill two birds with a stone and give it to my cousin. He's a software developer, and he definitely can give a different perspective on how useful a screen like this is. Also, he's been using a terrible, this scrappy rundown 1080p display, so he was definitely in need of a proper upgrade, and considering he's moving into his new house in like 2 or 3 years, which is considered short in Singaporean time when it comes to HDBs, this could be my 3 years in advance housewarming gift. You need a knife.
So do you like it?
Yep, I love it.
That's the most enthusiastic I love it. Is it good for computer science? Coding shit.
It's great.
That's all I needed.
So in conclusion then, should you buy the BenQ EW3880R? Well, for the specs that it has, $1,600 is actually surprisingly competitive. After I did some research, it seems like the closest competitor I could find is the Dell Ultrasharp alternative, and it comes in at a more expensive 2,000 Singapore dollars, which is 400 more than this. And the only main difference between this and that monitor seemingly is the fact that this can only charge 60 watts via USB and the Dell can charge 90 watts via USB. And I don't even think the Dell has a remote control. Now, initially, I actually did think $1,600 is pretty expensive for a monitor of this kind and what it can do. But upon doing research, it just seemed like, well, because this monitor type is quite new and not super popular, it was actually very reasonably well priced. This WQHD Plus resolution is not a very popular thing and not a very large scale thing that sells a lot of units. So as such, its price will naturally be a little bit higher. But for the people that want a 38-inch ultrawide display for maximum productivity and get even more real estate and even more pixels than even a 34-inch ultrawide display, this screen is definitely a great option to consider. It's obviously not for gaming, even though we have gameplay footage playing here, but if you're just trying to get work done or enjoy a bunch of media, though that's a bit overkill, this might just be the right choice for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Join my Discord if you have any questions you want to ask, and follow my Instagram for like behind the scenes and fun stuff. I'll probably try to do giveaways in the future. See you guys around. Bye.